Since it is cold outside, I thought to myself, we'll just stay with the theme of cold. This morning I want to talk about ice cream. You know, for the last several years, I've had people tell me, Father Ken, the next time you're in Leechburg, you got to go to this ice cream place. They have the biggest and the best ice cream cones. Well, I could never find a place. Well, it turned out to be back in August, just several months ago. I finally found the place. It's a gas station, and they sell the ice cream cones on the side of the gas station. So I went there and I got myself a large chocolate ice cream cone. And when a lady handed it to me, it was the biggest cone I'd ever seen in my life. It was so exciting to get that ice cream cone. There was about 11 inches of ice cream. Now, the part of the ice cream that connects to the cone, the base, is about 2.5 in diameter. And I looked inside that ice cream cone. My initial thought was I would purchase the ice cream cone, get back in my vehicle, and enjoy the ice cream cone as I was driving back to Lowell. When I saw the size of that ice cream cone, I said, there's no way I can have this ice cream cone and drive back to Lowell. It's going to drip all over my pants and my shirt. So I decided to sit there at the picnic table until I could get this ice cream cone under control and make it smaller and more manageable. Then I could drive at the same time, enjoy my ice cream cone. So I'm enjoying my ice cream cone, trying to shrink it down in size. A car pulls in. Prior to that, I was the only customer there. This car pulls in, a husband and wife. They both get out of the car, and she walks to the picnic table 2 down from mine. The husband said to his wife, what kind of cone do you want? And she said, doesn't matter. So the man walks up to the window, and then after a couple of minutes, he returns with a big smile on his face, and he got the exact same thing I had. 2 large chocolate ice cream cones. These things were just as big as mine. And with a smile on his face, he hands his wife one of the ice cream cones. She grabbed it from him, and she started yelling at him. Literally yelling at him. She said, you know I can't eat this much ice cream, and you know I can't stand chocolate. And she is yelling at her husband. I'm just sitting there, and I'm embarrassed for the guy. I'm trying to look away, and she just keeps yelling and yelling and yelling. She just won't stop. I started thinking to myself, you know, not allowing priests to marry is looking like a pretty good idea. This guy might join the priesthood. Now, that's the key point of today's gospel reading. When you don't have clarity and you don't explain yourself to someone else, that leads to confusion, and confusion usually leads to confrontation. Now, John, the author of today's gospel reading, he wrote this gospel 110 AD. John wrote the gospel for Greek-speaking and Greek-reading people. Now, John himself was proficient in both Greek and Hebrew. And every so often, through the course of John's gospel, and all the chapters of John's gospel, you're going to see this often. Every so often, as John was writing his gospel reading, he would use a Hebrew word. Now, he wrote the gospel in Greek, but every so often, he inserted a Hebrew word. And every time he decided to use a Hebrew word, he would quickly offer a translation, what it means. Because John realized what? The Greeks are going to be reading this gospel. He wants them to read it. They don't know Hebrew. And if you read something you don't understand, what are you going to do? You're going to stop reading. I don't understand what I'm reading. So he decides every so often to use a Hebrew word, and he offers the translation for the Hebrew word. And in today's gospel reading, he does this 3 times. Let's take a look at verse 38 of the first chapter of John. Now, right here, this is verse 38. It says, what are you looking for? And that's Jesus speaking. And they said to him, Rabbi, and there it is, which is translated means teacher. Where are you staying? So the word rabbi, whenever you read John's gospel and you see that he translates the word, you can quickly identify that word rabbi is a Hebrew word, not Greek. But he offers the translation. John realized you cannot offer enough clarity. It's going to be very important not to confuse people and always explain what you mean. Now, he does it again in verse 41. Let's take a look at 41. Verse 41, they're going to be talking at the very beginning line. This is going to be Andrew. He first, and that's Andrew, found his own brother Simon and told him, we have found the Messiah, which is translated Christ. So the word Messiah is a Hebrew word. And again, John offers the translation for that word to strangers who aren't familiar with Hebrew. Now, John does this again in verse 42. He tries to offer clarity. Let's take a look at that verse. This is the last time he does it in the gospel that I just read a couple minutes ago. Now, Jesus looked at him and said, and he's looking at Simon Peter, Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. So Cephas, again, is the Hebrew word. So the simple little message of the gospel reading, and this is important for all of us, is always to make yourself clear. When you're talking to someone, you want them to do something for you, or you need a favor done, or whatever your conversation is, it's important that you offer clarity. Because if you don't, that just leads to confusion. Confusion leads to confrontation. Now think about the last argument, the last disagreement you had with a family member. Now, after you have an argument, a disagreement, and things calm down, and people go into their own corners, and you assess, how did that argument get started? Now, this isn't the root of every argument, but it's the root of many. And you sit back and you say to yourself, you might say to yourself, "I know what went wrong. I didn't explain myself well." Or you might say, "I said something because I assumed I knew what he or she was asking for, was talking about. I made the assumption because it wasn't that clear to me." And that led to what? A confrontation. General Douglas MacArthur, one of the great generals of the Second World War, and also in the early year or two of the Korean conflict, and then he retired about the year 2 of the Korean conflict. In many of his writings, he always talks about how important it is to have good communication, good clarity. Because he would always say, if you don't have good clarity, good communication, that leads to, and he wouldn't use the word confrontation, he always used the word war. That leads to some kind of battle because you didn't make yourself clear. I mean, that husband and wife over at that ice cream place over there in Leechburg, when they got out of the car and he said to his wife, "What do you want? What kind of cone?" And she said, "It doesn't matter." If she had just said to him, "I'll take a small vanilla," he would have purchased it, handed it to her, and they would have had a nice afternoon. Instead of having all these words, all these fights. And he had to feel bad. I felt bad for him. I still feel bad for him. He might still be living with her. How important it is to make sure you're clear. You know, that's so very important. I think that's just a simple little message, but the next time you're talking to someone, your family member, friend, or someone you work with, make sure that you speak not clearly in terms of your words, that you don't mutter, but what you're trying to describe is clear, that they know exactly what you want. Because when you know what someone's asking of you, you can respond accordingly. And if you don't, you just assume, I think this is what he wants, I think this is what she said, then you're probably going to make a mistake, and that's going to lead to an argument, and that leads to all kind of problems. And what you want to pray for, and I think that's the message of the gospel reading, Heavenly Father, give me the gift of clarity. Help me to tell people what I want, and allow me to know what people need in my life. Because when they know what I want and I know what they need, then we're going to get along well. We won't have little arguments that would not have occurred if we simply made sure we were clear in the beginning.